Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, officers and members, and welcome to this meeting of the Development Control Committee. The first thing I must do is tell you about the fire evacuation procedures. There are no fire alarms scheduled for this evening. Therefore, if the fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the building immediately. The fire exits are located at the rear and side of this room. Go down the stairs and meet in the War Memorial Park. And don't run, please. Thank you. Now, next, Vice Chairman. Members, we don't have a Vice Chairman. I would propose Councillor Graham Round, if that's agreed. Thank you. Now, this meeting is being webcast. Oh wait, where do I get that? Three. Apologies for absence. I have Councillors Mitchell, Miller and Mrs. Diane Taylor. And for resignations and replacements, I have Councillor Round, Councillor Robert Taylor, and that's it. Any from yours? No? Right, we'll move on. Any declarations of interest? No? Good. I have no urgent items and announcements. Now to confirm the minutes on paper A. Agreed. Thank you very much. I have no referrals from other committees or the Council. I have no issues referred by the Cabinet. So we move on to application for planning permission and public participation, paper B. And before we do, I just want to read, for the benefit of the members of the public attending, I'd like to explain who everybody is around the table. My name's Councillor Donald Sherlock, and I'm the chairman of the committee for this evening only. Down the sides of the table to the left and right are the councillors who sit on this committee and who will be making the decisions on the applications this evening. Along the back, under the windows, are those councillors who are not on the committee but have asked their views, as well as additional officers who may be called upon to help councillors. In addition, I would like to explain that the Development Control Committee is a regulatory committee and not a political meeting. The committee will be looking at the evidence brought before us tonight and will make a decision based on planning reasons. We are guided by national and local planning guidance and policy. I understand that planning can be emotive, and I ask everyone remains polite and professional throughout the evening. May I ask all speakers, including visiting members, to speak clearly and to return to their seats once their presentation is complete. No further dialogue between members of the committee and speakers will be permitted once questioning has finished. And may I ask all members of committee members to avoid repetition and ask members to keep any comments to a maximum of 4 minutes. Thank you. Right. Now, item number 1, Overton Hill, land north of London Road, Overton, and I will ask the officer to introduce that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This application is for outline planning permission for up to 120 dwellings, including 40% affordable housing provision and 5.52 hectares of open space and ecological buffer, with all matters reserved except means of access. Members viewed the application site last Friday, and the viewing panel notes are set out within the committee update paper. Members' attention is drawn to the comments within the update paper, which in brief also note the following. An additional letter of objection has been received from a member of the public, which officers have responded to within the update paper. The Hampshire County Council Public Rights of Way officer has raised no objection and has recommended a condition to secure details should any works be required to the public right of way. Condition 21, which relates to archaeological works, has been amended to make the timescales for submission of the report less onerous. Additional comments in relation to the best contribution and allotment contributions have been made. Condition 16, relating to the construction method statement, has been amended to be more precise as to what details officers would look to secure. An additional condition has also been added to ensure that trees are protected along the emergency access. Officers have also responded to concerns raised by Councillor Tilbury regarding water voles and otters and have suggested have amended the condition in this regard to secure details of mitigation. Officers' recommendation remains for approval, subject to no new material objections being made as a result of the conservation area notification and subject to the completion of a Section 106 agreement.
Thank you. And to members of the public, I didn't point out that the immediately to my left and right are the officers who will be advising us councillors. My apologies to you officers. Thank you. Now I've got two councillors to speak and no other members of the public. Is that correct? No, it's not here. Nobody from the parish council? No. And objector, Mr. MacDonald Smith. Do you wish to speak, sir? Right. If you'd like to come forward, then. You will have 4 minutes, and I'll give you, when you get to a minute to go, I'll give you a reminder. And you just press the long black button in front of you. And the light.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity of speaking to you tonight. I am conscious that I am very limited for time and I will try and stick to essentials. However, I must first declare an interest, as I have been living in the existing Overton Hill estate since I retired to Overton in 2009. My wife and I have found Overton to be a most pleasant village in which to live, and the estate to be a tranquil one, fully deserving of its reputation to be family and pedestrian friendly in allowing for fairly free movement of children and adequate facilities for parking, loading and unloading of trade and domestic transport to meet the convenience of householders. At the same time, I fully appreciate the urgent national need to build more homes, and I do not therefore oppose the principle of the outline application. I have closely followed the progress of the application since the Turley Associates presentation in 2012, and in response to their request, I commented at length to them at that time. I have since spent many hours studying the progress of the application, and throughout I have represented my principal concerns that the proposal in the application to restrict all outside vehicular access to the new site, except for emergency vehicles, to one sole access point, a point moreover which could only be approached from the B3400 along the whole length of the main established entry road for the existing estate. This, I think, is unsound. This road is only a fairly narrow internal estate route, twisting and undulating between the frontages of existing dwellings lining both sides of the road, and which within its length has 7 minor junctions with side roads providing further access to other houses within the estate. The traffic along this route already carries all movement to the 100 or so houses within the existing estate, including the requirements for tradesmen and visitors and for delivery and maintenance purposes. To superimpose on this route the additional traffic that would be needed for the construction and domestic needs and maintenance in perpetuity of 120 new houses and of the internal roads and infrastructure for the new development, which would have to use this access. I consider that this will, despite what some people have claimed otherwise, be bound to be detrimental to the amenities of those who live in the existing estate and who wish to continue to enjoy the tranquility of their homes. In the course of preparing this presentation for you tonight, I have consulted widely in the existing estate, and much concern has been expressed to me about the proposals for access, many households having asked me to bring their concerns to your notice, though I detected an undercurrent of despair in those who feel that up to now their opinions have been humiliatingly disregarded. I most sincerely believe, therefore, that the proposal to have only one access point to the new site in a location requiring the passage of all traffic to the new site to transit in perpetuity through the existing estate pays little regard to the severe adverse effects.
Less than a minute to go.
Whilst various considerations seem to have been ruled out, general access to the applications from Station Road, little effort seems to be made to study the possible routes from the B3400 in the neighbourhood of the Berry Down recreation areas or elsewhere to traverse the open fields and enter the new site from the east, thus avoiding the existing estate. I think that it is essential that your approval of this application should be withheld whilst a more determined effort is made to find an equitable entry route from the B3400 to the application site which does not curtail the amenities and tranquility of the existing Overton Hill estate.
Would you finish
Surely
up,
we should
please?
not set out to create a new estate at the expense of despoiling the well-found amenities of the existing estate. Thank you.
Any members got questions for Mr. MacDonald-Smith? Councillor Tomlin.
This one.
I can't speak otherwise. Stop speaking. Question for you. Good evening. How do you find currently the exit out onto the B3400? Are you a regular user at peak times at all, or how would you? Yes.
Yes. Not unduly difficult. Obviously, it depends a little bit where you're going and what time of day. But if you're coming out of the estate, to turn down to the village, obviously in the rush hour, it's sometimes quite busy. The other way is not so bad, but it does vary.
Any more? Thank you, Mr. MacDonald-Smith. Now I've got both ward councillors. Oh, sorry. Mr. O'Donovan. You get 4 minutes, Mr. O'Donovan, and I'll give you a shout when 1 minute is left.
There we go. Good evening, Chair. I'm the planning consultant for the applicant. I submit that there are at least 3 particularly good reasons why the officer recommendation of approval should be supported. First, the site's locational attributes. Very few, if any, sites within one of the borough's largest villages are located so close to a town centre containing a wide range of shopping and community facilities, and also to a local primary school, railway station and bus services. Walking, cycling and the use of public transport are all very real possibilities. These self-same locational advantages resulted in the adjacent land being allocated for housing in the last local plan. The current proposals represent a logical extension. Great care has been taken to keep the housing to the lower slopes and to retain a sizable buffer to the River Test in order to safeguard ecological assets, Overton's landscape setting and the conservation area. Your officer's detailed assessment for the emerging local plan, which considered landscape and ecological impacts, accessibility, highways and numerous other issues, concluded that the application site is the best of the available sites at Overton. Second, the scheme will deliver a range of community benefits, including a high quality housing development in character with and which respects the area's character, 48 affordable dwellings, a 4.93 hectare neighbourhood park, some 6 times the requirement, foul sewer capacity improvements which will benefit the community as a whole, the continuous footway to station approach, and various Section 106 contributions to deliver highways, playing fields, allotments, education and other open space enhancements for the whole community. Third, I note Overton Hills residents' comments about the construction and resident traffic. I say the road was purpose designed to accommodate the 120 dwellings now proposed. There is no highway objection, and indeed the 5.5 metre wide carriageway is the standard width for an estate road to serve the proposed number of dwellings. The residents have understandably grown used to the existing low level of traffic movements. It would be normal for them to object to any increase. The fact remains, however, the road is wide enough to accommodate on-street parking with good forward visibility so that vehicles can pass each other safely. Also, the number of vehicles at only 2 or 3 per minute in the peak hour is very low. I have anticipated some of the other concerns that's raised and addressed in the committee report.
1 minute.
Thank you. It's suggested that the development should be delayed to allow a period of consolidation. The facts are that last year there was a net gain of 1 dwelling in Overton. The year before that there was a net gain of 3 dwellings in Overton. I suggest to you that 120 dwellings would take 2.5 or 3 years to build out. We're talking about 40 dwellings per annum in the context of about 1,800 dwellings in Overton. We're talking about a modest 2 to 3% increase. In terms of density, you will, I suspect, have heard some concerns relating to the density and other densities around Overton. My suggestion is that you should look at the density of the immediately adjacent development and considering the appropriate density for this site. Thirdly, there's concern about drainage. The Parish Council raised it, we've investigated it, we've submitted reports to Southern Water, and though you'll see there's no objection. So my final point, my final comment, is that there are no easy answers to housing delivery. But I suggest to you this site and this proposal is as good as it gets. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. O'Donovan. Members, have you any specific questions for Mr. O'Donovan relating to the application?
Thank you, Chairman. Good evening, sir. Thank you very much for that. I just wanted to ask for your help, please. We read in our papers, in the section on page 7 of 67, the objection raised by Overton Parish Council. In the second paragraph, they tell us, it seems a great shame that there is not more liaison and consultation involving borough officers, Turley Associates and Overton Parish Council at this early stage. I just wondered if you could help us out by giving us your comment on that comment, please.
Certainly, the background was that our public exhibition was held. There were invitations sent out to 200 local residents. We had 76 attendees, and subsequently we met the Parish Council on 2 occasions. What we were seeking to do through feedback from local residents and the Parish Council was to identify what the key issues were in relation to the development proposal. As a consequence of that proposal, scheme amendments were made. What I found myself saying to the Parish Council was, with respect, this is an outline application with all matters reserved for subsequent approval. What the Parish Council were trying to do, I think, was to get into a great level of detail about the proposals. So I was suggesting to them that with an outline application with all matters other than means of access reserved for subsequent approval, we should be looking at achieving an appropriate design and access statement and appropriate parameters plans. So the context really, in answer to your question, was We did liaise, we did engage, we made changes, but we weren't minded to go into a level of detail which wasn't appropriate for an outline application.
Councillor Potter.
Thank you, Chair. Hello, Mr. Donovan. Just a couple of questions, if I may. I mean, first of all, can I just clarify the applicant in the name of Portals Property Limited? I mean, this is an application by De La Rue, is that right?
Sorry, Portals are a subsidiary of De La Rue. It's semantics, really, whether it is De La Rue Portals. Everybody knows it's De La Rue Portals, I think, locally.
Okay. I mean, De La Rue own the land, don't they? That's right. Can I just check, in regard to, I mean, the general commentary you make about community developments, the wish to enter into a 106 agreement, all of the community enhancements that would come from that. Regarding a site of this sort with 120 units of mixed size and mixed provision, have you made any estimates about the number of young people of school age who would likely live on the site? I mean, I guess as a planning consultant, this is the sort of thing you would do all the time. And could you also confirm, I mean, my understanding is that in terms of school provision in Overton, secondary school children are already being shipped out to Brighton Hill, is that right? So do you have any contribution to make in terms of school provision within Overton itself?
Essentially, that there are recognised multipliers for dwellings for both primary and secondary school education. So you can quantify or make a fairly good forecast about the number of pupils that are being generated by the development. What we've done is we've gone off to speak to the Education Authority, and we've spoken to them about the capacity at Overton and Whitchurch Primary School and at the secondary schools. And as a consequence of that, we've been asked to make a very significant financial contribution to improvements at those schools. It's in excess of £1 million that the Section 106 contribution is to enhancements at primary and secondary schools. And that is the standard, and in my experience, normal approach in exactly this sort of situation.
Clarify that. I mean, in terms of those discussions, the clear indication in respect of that provision of £1 million is what? To enhance the facilities, expand the facilities at the existing school, is that right?
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Tomlin.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, Mr. O'Donovan. Just a couple of things. You mentioned that the foul sewer improvements would be an improvement for the whole of the area, or Overton, I think. Can you, because we've looked at that, there's a concern on our page 29 of 67 that there is a hydraulic solution to the site. I mean, how, you seem very confident, is that now established, or it's just a question of rolling it out, or is there still some design work?
No, it's agreed. Basically, a capacity assessment has been done. That was submitted to Atkins, who are agents on behalf of Southern Water. The solution is to increase the diameter of a pipe from 225 millimetres up to 300 millimetres over a 530 metre long stretch. On that basis, Southern Water and Atkins are saying that they have no objection to the proposal, and there are established requisition procedures by which that can be put into effect. There is a condition on the committee report requiring that all that detail be submitted and agreed by the local authority before development commences. It would be crackers to start work on a development without adequate sewage capacity.
Thank you. And the second question, correct me if I heard you wrong, you referred to the number of extra vehicle trips. I thought you said 3, but what did you...
Basically, in your report, you'll see reference to our development generating in the peak hour something of the order of 71 or 71 vehicle movements in that hour. That's 1 every 45 seconds, roughly. What I've done is also factored in the existing housing and the amount of traffic that's generated from from 99 dwellings. What I'm saying is that the impact of the existing housing and the new housing goes to about 2 or 3 vehicles per minute in the peak hour. So that's one about every 20 seconds.
Thank you.
Councillor Ryan.
Thank you, Chair. I accept that in the report, highways have made their conclusions, etc., about construction traffic coming through the existing estate, etc. But I just wondered if you could sort of offer any comfort to residents that you might do something special to manage traffic volumes in terms of construction traffic and driver behaviour coming through their existing estate.
The normal approach is twofold, really. It's one, the use of construction environmental management plan. That's a condition on a planning permission. But what you'll always find is that any reputable builder, any of the national house builders, will have their own codes of practice to ensure and to minimise neighbour disturbance. So I would expect that in addition to the safeguards by a planning condition, you'll actually find that the house builders themselves will ensure minimum disturbance. There will be some disturbance, construction traffic. You can't build 120 dwellings without some disturbance. What I'm saying is the combination of the condition and the house builders' normal codes of practice will minimise that as far as is feasible.
Any more? Councillor Hood.
Chair. Good evening, sir. Can I ask you about your biodiversity? The reason I ask you that is I've read with interest about the Overton Biodiversity Society, their research, and they've identified that there is a large colony there. Also about otters as well. I think they said somewhere there was otters identified.
I think the large colony is a reference to slow worms. What you'll find is that we have delivered or promoting a buffer of 12 metres wide along the whole of the western boundary of the site. So we've identified that's where the slow worms are, and we're suggesting it's on the plan there. You'll see the western boundary is a buffer which is specifically designed to protect slow worms, and that's part of the biodiversity. The other issue, I think, which is really addressed very comprehensively in the update report, relates to water voles and otters in the River Test. There's no question that we're talking about an SSSI along the line of the River Test. You would expect to find those habitats in that area. Our ecologists were very familiar with that, very aware of that, and it's on that basis that we've provided a buffer between the development and the River Test. Actually, adjacent to the River Test, there's woodland areas where there is no public access, which protects actually the environments of the river itself. So what we've resulted in is Natural England and the Council's own biodiversity officer being happy with that relationship, but suggesting that a biodiversity mitigation plan be introduced, which we're entirely happy with.
Councillor Bowen.
Good evening. Just one question, and it goes back to Councillor Potter's question about children. You said there was a formula, did you, for the number of houses, which will give you the number of children, but did you give us a number of children that you thought?
For primary school, it's 0.3, so for every dwelling, it's 0.3. For secondary school, it's 0.21. That's the formula that's used. And it's on that basis that a financial contribution of the order that I've set out to members was calculated.
How does that convert to children?
From memory, it was 36 primary school age and 25, 26 secondary, I think, if that's... 36 and 25, something of that order. That's right.
Members, any more questions? In that case, thank you very much, Mr. O'Donovan. We now have the ward councillors, led by Councillor Mrs. Baker.
Evening, everybody, and thank you to the committee for coming out and viewing the site. I'm here this evening to ask you to carefully consider whether you could refuse this application. As those of you who have been following planning and infrastructure will know, I've been repeatedly to meetings of that overview and scrutiny committee to argue that there has been a great rate of change in Overton in recent years, and that Overton needed a little time for those changes to settle. And I was pleased that the most recent meeting of the Planning and Infrastructure Committee, before the draft local plan went to Cabinet, did agree with me to shift this allocation from the first 5 years into the second 5 years of the plan period. So that's one of my concerns. One is infrastructure. You've heard one of the benefits and attractions of the site being its proximity to the station, but we've been promised in the past additional car parking at the station, which hasn't been achieved. The station is accessed up a private road in the dark with no footway, certainly no cycleway, and very limited parking. So once you do get to the station, then you have a great limit on whether you can find a seat on the train if you're travelling during the morning peak hour. So please bear in mind that the station isn't quite the benefit that it might sound as though it were. The issue of sewerage has been raised, and yes, it would be crackers to develop a site before there was the ability of the sewerage system to take it, but that's what happened at Foxdown in Overton, when Southern Water couldn't actually deliver improvements that were necessary. And I'd just draw your attention to condition 18, I think it is, which states clearly that not only does a strategy have to be developed, but it has to be put into effect. The work has to be completed before any property can be connected to the public sewer. And please don't lift that condition. Please ensure that is absolutely solid. That is so important. Briefly, I'd like to mention the impact on the conservation area. This does affect the setting of the conservation area, and you see there in the report that there are some concerns about the existing development. And I'm sorry to be back to planning and infrastructure, but I believe they're having a report tomorrow night at their meeting about review of conservation areas. And that quotes Overton as being fourth highest on the need to have its conservation areas reconsidered, and draws particular concern about a large development called Glebe Meadow.
1 minute.
Thank you. Glebe Meadow was built in 1980, so it was before the last conservation appraisal was done, and is 26 houses. Yes, that's quite a large development for Overton. The proposal before us, for you tonight, is will bring the one estate to be 219 houses. So the impact of that on the conservation area is going to be significant. I do understand and sympathise with the concerns that residents have about the access route. The parish council did not suggest that access should be along Station Road, nor would I suggest any access should be along Station Road. And I see that there is more detail in condition 16. But in summary, I would say, please, I would ask that this was refused. Overton does need time to settle, and we do need to consider the impact on the conservation area. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any members got questions for Councillor Mrs. Baker? Councillor Hood.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, Councillor Mrs. Baker, Paula. Interesting enough that Mr. O'Donovan made a comment that last year on new houses, one was built, two the year before. Now, you've said quite openly tonight about the impact on Overton. Roughly speaking, over the last 5 years, say, how many properties have been built then?
Well, there's the 99 houses on Overton Hill and 75 at Foxtown, so two big estates. And then there was some infill as well.
Councillor Tomlin.
Good evening, Councillor. Question I've got is, can you help us with the current situation at the primary school? We've just learned that that could be 36 more children in the area. What's the current capacity, if any?
I believe it's very close to capacity, and it has been full and has had to be extended already, once already. Well, twice, I think, already.
Councillor Band.
Just continuing with the schools then, there's the catchment school for Overton then would be Whitchurch secondary school. Yeah.
Yes, secondary go to Testbourne at Whitchurch.
And if the primary school were full and they were supposed to go to Whitchurch, how easy is that journey for them? How for the primary school I'm talking about now? If Overton Primary School were full, and there was talk about transporting them to Whitchurch, because the applicant mentioned about contributions going to Whitchurch and Overton. How easy would the journey be from Overton to Whitchurch? Is there a convenient bus for school children?
Well, there is a service bus. The one at school, i.e. a normal publicly accessible bus, which the one that goes at the school time is very full. I've travelled on it quite a few times. There are also school buses going to the secondary school, but I'm not sure whether it would be appropriate to mix primary children on with secondary on a school bus.
And it would appear that there are already children going to Basingstoke from Overton because Whitchurch Secondary School is full. Is that true to your knowledge?
Yes, I understand that Testbourne is full, and the places are highly sought after. There have always been a number of children in Overton who have chosen to go to other secondary schools, but the majority wish to go to Testbourne, and the school is full, and I think that would be a great concern if children from within its catchment area couldn't get places there.
Councillor Round.
Thank you, Chair. There was a suggestion that, in terms of consultation, that the parish council felt left or out and sidelined. I just wonder how much the borough councillors have been involved in the consultation. Do you feel that has come forward properly?
I think I would share the view of the parish council that the public consultation event was only to the invitations went to a limited number of the current village residents, and certainly the parish council felt that that wasn't appropriate, and there should have been the wider opportunity for local residents to get involved.
Thank you. Again, going back to the parish council and looking at the comments from the parish council, just really inquiring whether you have a sort of knowledge of the workings of the parish council, as much that I just sort of noticed, and it might be just somebody's typos as such, but there's lots of I suggests an ISA, and it was that the clerk, the parish chairman, or is that the parish council saying those words?
I am also a parish councillor, and I believe there was detailed information, particularly the transport, that was produced by one of the parish councillors who specialises in transport on behalf of the parish council, and his detailed contributions were sent and were seen by all of the parish councillors, and so I can assure you that the eyes may have been left in there from his email, but those were the views of the parish council as a whole.
Councillor Bond.
To take us back to the schools again, because it involves the transport or the way that the children can get to school. The report mentions a half-hour walk. Having had something to do with schools in the past myself, a half-hour walk for primary school children, I think is pushing it a bit. But they then mention footpath 24 that runs by the River Test. Now, I don't know footpath 24 by the River Test. Would you say that was a safe route for children?
At first, I don't think I could walk from Overton, from this site to Whitchurch Primary School in half an hour. From Overton Primary School, or from...
I think it mentioned a half an hour walk from the site to Overton Primary School, and then they mentioned footpath. What your opinion?
If you're during the day and the weather is good, and perhaps with an adult attending, then fine. But for children on their own, or coming home from school during these winter months when it's dark, no, I don't think any parent would allow their children to walk unescorted of primary age along the footpath.
Thank you, Chairman. Hello. When you were successful in arguing, as you did, for the site to be allocated to the second phase, the second 5 year of the local plan, presumably that was on the basis, am I right in saying it was on the basis that the community infrastructure couldn't sustain a development of this magnitude in this more immediate period? And if it was, education apart, what other community infrastructure matters did you have regard to when you argued that case?
Well, there are an awful lot of ways in which a historic village finds it quite difficult to adapt to having a much larger population than it was originally designed for. There's extremely limited parking in the village centre. There are quite long delays waiting to get appointments at the surgery on occasions. Surgery's had to be extended already and is on a very constrained site. There's very little parking at the surgery, and that causes problems neighbouring areas of housing, because people who are visiting the surgery park in residential roads. Access to the school is up a hill, quite a steep hill, and so lots of people drive to the school and then can't find anywhere safely to stop and let the children out. So we've had to do a lot of yellow lime painting around the school to maintain safety on the road, and contemplating the possibility of needing an awful lot more traffic regulation orders near the station because of the limitation on station parking. So yes, you can't park at school, can't park at surgery, can't park at the station, can't park in the middle of the village, and yet people do want to use their cars all the time. Human nature, isn't it, to get everywhere. So there is the problems of the sewerage infrastructure. There are no facilities apart from a couple of cycle stands in the centre of the village for cycling, and I know the report suggests that it's perfectly safe to cycle in and around Overton without needing cycle lanes marked on the pavement, but there's an awful lot of local residents who say they do take their cars because they don't feel safe on the roads on their bikes. The feeling generally is that the village is bursting at the seams at the moment and needs time to catch its breath.
Any other questions, Councillor Mrs. Baker? Right, thank you very much. Councillor Tilbury. Four minutes and one, I'll give you a shout at 1 minute.
Okay, well, first, Overton is not a town, as Mr. Donovan said. We don't have a town centre, we have a village centre. I think it's rather sad that Delarue are trying to railroad this application through. They know we have a democratic process, we have a local plan, and as a large local employer and a large landowner in Overton, I think it's absolutely disgraceful they're trying to force this through now, for no other reason than they can argue we don't have a 5-year land supply. Well, that's just not good enough. I mean, residents were asked to ascend this, at the site and look at the plans and such like, but they weren't given any notice, and the rest of the village didn't have any notice at all. We were told about, myself and Paula were phoned about 2 days before to say this was going to happen. Had they given us warning, it could have gone in the parish newsletter, we could have encouraged other people to go, but it was done at a very short notice and in a rush, you know. I mean, it's almost like they didn't want people to know about it. And unfortunately, I think one of the problems I find is that due to the confusion around the local plan, many residents are unaware of the threat of the 120 houses on this site, but they're not aware of this application. Not helped by the short public consultation periods that slip between the parish newsletters. This is the largest ever development by far to be inflicted on Overton, yet Delarue have tried to pretend it will only affect immediate neighbours, when the reality is it will affect everyone in Overton. Our services and roads, as you've already heard, are at breaking point already. The density, I mean, our officers and Delarue both claim the density is 34 dwellings per hectare, yet quote a figure of 120 houses on 3.18 hectares. This cannot be right. 120 divided by 3.18 equals 38 dwellings per hectare. They also claim the Overton Hill development, the original one, was built at a density of 30 to 35 dwellings per hectare. Yet the officers' report at the time, in 2001, claimed it was only 32. Well, they can't both be right, can they? The reality is this site is smaller than the previous development in terms of area, yet contains 20% more houses. So it cannot be the same density, can it? You don't need to be a rocket scientist to work that one out. As for the biodiversity, well, they've suggested, oh, we knew all about the wild water voles and otters. That's funny, because if you read the report, it just says we've assessed the sites and we think it's unlikely there'll be any there because the habitat isn't suitable. But unfortunately, no one told the water voles this. Now, the Overton Biodiversity site spent a lot of time doing this survey, and they actually had to get permission from Delarue to actually go onto their land to do it. Now, what effect will a large housing estate with a sizable number of predatory cats and even dogs have on such vulnerable creatures? Has it been assessed? Well, no, it hasn't, because they said there aren't any there. And of course, if you read the update, it's quite comical. It suggests in terms of potential mitigation, the handbook advises it would be appropriate to consider the options for educating new residents through leaflets and interpretation boards. Well, I didn't know cats could read. That's news to me. We also know we have otters in there because we actually had a parish council meeting interrupted by an otter, so I don't go into that. That was actually in the Gazette. This report was sent to the borough with a covering letter, you know, so they're not unaware of any of this stuff there. The study also suggested the presence of skylarks on the site. Yet, you know, well, we can solve that by putting a little pen round them. But if they actually read, again, their own report, it actually says in there that actually that won't work. Their own consultants told them that won't work. The NPPF is very clear. It basically says proposal development on land within or outside a site of special scientific interest likely to have an adverse effect on a site of special scientific interest should not normally be permitted. But this has not even been addressed because they're saying, well, we didn't know anything about it. We know all the transport problems. Parking is a nightmare in the village everywhere. At the school, it's impossible. At the railway station, there's cars dumped all over the places because the previous applications were supposed to deal with all that and they didn't. The road isn't even adopted. It still belongs to Delarue. Network Rail only have permission to allow their customers to drive on it or even walk on there. You cannot access Overton Station by a publicly owned road or footpath. How ridiculous is that? One thing that seems to be missed out of the officer's report is the adjacent landfill site. Now, we had problems with that because what it says on the site is we can't find out from the landowner what they actually dumped in this landfill site. We can't assess the risk. Who is the landowner? It's Delarue.
Come to a conclusion, please.
I think that's about it. And as we said, the schools are all full, Whitchurch is full, and Whitchurch is going to get more houses. So how can they take the capacity there? This is just ridiculous.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Tilbury. Any questions for Councillor Tilbury, members? Councillor Tomlin, followed by Councillor Potter, followed by Councillor Hood.
Thank you, Chair. Evening, Councillor. Question for you. The Parish Council obviously are not here tonight. It's a question hopefully you can answer. Does the village have a design statement or a plan? And if so, do you think that this development has taken anything into account for it, for your knowledge? Thank you.
Yes, we certainly have a village design statement. I think this plan just basically ignores it. And I think that's often the case when we've had any new development in Overton. It's interpreted in its own way, but it is. I mean, and they argue, and of course, there's things like the conservation and the aspect and the biodiversity. It's all there, but it just gets ignored. It's, we don't really get very far with these things. We spend a lot of time. We encourage people to do village design statements. The Biodiversity Society will work very well with the borough, but it's quite obvious that the borough just stick it all in a box and forget about it.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Potter.
Thank you, Chairman. Hello. Good evening, Ian. If I missed it in what you said, forgive me really, but I think I'd read somewhere in regard to Delarue's own study under the heading of biodiversity about nesting skylarks on this piece of land. Am I right in that regard? And if that is the case, and sorry, confirm that, I mean, do you know of any provision that's being made in that respect?
Come on, yeah, it is actually in there. It's what they're talking about is having like a skylark enclosure, an area that's set off for them. But how you protect skylark again from cats? I mean, the trouble is you start moving the town. You're trying to turn Overton into a town and then trying to impose it on the countryside, and it will have an impact because the problem is if it keeps growing like this, it will be a town. Well, skylarks, for those who don't know, are ground nesting birds. So they can't even hide up a tree, although cats can climb as well anyway, so when they're not attacking the water voles, they'll be after the skylarks. But the point is their own report actually states, I've got it here somewhere, I'll read you what it says on them. It's not proposed to include an area in the park dedicated for skylark nesting, as it is envisaged that there will be large numbers of children playing and people walking and exercising their dogs within the park, and the levels of disturbance will be too high for nesting birds. Well, who would disagree with that? It's clearly right, but that's exactly what we're proposing to do. I mean, the skylarks they're on the red list. They're one of the most protected birds in this countryside. Otters and water voles are now they are all protected species, and we're just sort of like, well, just ignore them. They're not really there.
Councillor Hood.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, Councillor Ian. In previous developments we've had at Overton, there has been problems with drainage. What's your views about the drainage at this suggested new development? And not only the effect on the new development, if it was approved, but the adjacent development, what impact would it have there? And what about sewage? Is there a problem with sewage as well?
There's been a long-running problem with sewage in Overton because it is over capacity. As I think Paula mentioned, that Foxstone was not supposed to have been built or complete. There was a limit on the number of houses, but Southern Water couldn't do the work. So in the end, the developer came back to the borough and they said, well, all right, you can carry on, because it was very difficult to turn it down. And of course, with predictable results, because all these sites are on the hills, so the people there won't suffer from sewage problems. The people who live in Overton in the old part, in Bridge Street, in those areas, the low-lying, they're the ones whose toilets get back flushed flushed out, and if you know, and you see raw sewage coming out of people's toilet because it's blocked up further up, it's not very nice. And it's not just a problem with, you know, they say, well, we can improve this piece of pipeline. Well, that would get it to that junction quicker, but once you get into the main one, there's still a problem all the way through, because the sewer was put in the 1930s along the line of the river. Obviously the river's infiltrated it, or the roots have infiltrated it, and it blocks up all the time. But again, it's the people that always suffer are the people in the older part of the village, because they're the ones down in the dip. And, you know, gravity works in rather obvious ways, and good news for people on the new estates, they don't suffer. It's the people in the older estates that suffer.
Councillor Ryan.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor. You had a bit of a rant in terms of the borough, and I think when you talk about the borough, its planners and this committee totally ignore village design statements, and from my side, that's not been the process. I think village design statements do have their place, and certainly from my parish, we've been able to refer to it and use it a lot. But you know, village design statement is about guiding the design and character of development. It's not there to stop development, and I think it's wrong to suggest in this meeting that, you know, it's being ignored. The parish council in their report do not, I looked again very quickly there, but don't say that they reference their village design statement at all. So I would just like to sort of correct that point, that, you know, village design statements are not ignored.
Well, just to respond, I think I think you're right. The problem is, I think they didn't include it because we've always been told it's a bit out of date now. It was done in 2003. It's 10 years old. It's 10 years old now, and it's not seen as being so relevant. But you're right. The point is, it's about guiding development, and the point is, what do we end up with? Is, you know, it's difficult with this one because we can't look at the houses because it is purely an outline one. But the principle of development is, you know, you don't build right up to the edge of a triple SSI, do you? That's the sort of thing that's in there. We want to protect the natural environment, and that's what the NPPF says. That's, you know, says very clearly. And the stuff from Natural England and such like is, it's a bit, well, they just say, well, go and look at our advice. Well, I've looked at their advice, and it's very clear.
Yeah, thanks, though. But I just wanted to point that, you know, you are happy that the village design statement has not been totally ignored in this situation, and that you can't reference it in terms of giving us any pointers towards, you know, a possible thinking about refusal of this application.
Well, if I had a copy with me, I might be able to, but that's the point. It's, you know, I think we tend to view the VDS as being a bit sort of redundant. You know, we're looking at some replacement. We're looking at a community planning over. We're doing the neighbourhood planning over, and all that's goes out the window, isn't it? Because we're being overrun with applications like this that are coming forward in advance of the local plan. This isn't local democracy at all, is it? This is the big landowner stamping their foot on us and telling us what they're going to do. Which we were used to that when Paul's owned all the land and could walk all over us and employed everybody. But why Delarue think they can get away with it is another thing altogether. They don't even, and that's the other issue, sustainability. Where are these people going to work? They're not going to work at Delarue. They're not employing more people.
Any more questions for Councillor Tilbury? Great. Thank you, Councillor. Right, members. Right. Questions to officers, yes. Who was first? Councillor Bowen.
Yeah, just a couple of questions, please. Do we know from the Housing Needs Register what the need is in Overton in terms of social housing?
Sorry, Councillor Bannon, just for the delay. We don't have the exact figures with us, but we do have advice from the housing officer that supports the provision of the 40% proposed to the application. So no, I don't have the exact figure in terms of the need with us, but the housing officer does support the application.
Secondly, there was another one down here. Oh yes, can you define street character that can result in slowing traffic. What do you mean by street character?
Typically, I would see that phrase used where dwellings front onto a road, there's likely to be frontage activity and items like that, unlike, say, an older distributor road where you just got back garden fences and things onto that road and there's nothing there to actually influence the behaviour of how a user might use that road.
So you're saying that because it's the front of a house, the cars are going to slow down?
In comparison to a situation where you have no properties fronting onto that street and you have blank elevations such as large hedgerows or continuous fencing or something like that with no street activity whatsoever, I would expect somewhere with an active street scene and houses fronting closely onto the road, front doors, etc., to have a certain level of activity, which is going to be more akin to a residential area where speeds should be lower.
Take your word for that. And there was another one, page 22 of 67. What's a virtual footpath, please?
That's where there's insufficient width to accommodate a standard footway to the side of the road, say where you might be crossing over a bridge and the parapets of the bridge are adjacent to the carriageway, so a colour treatment and carriageway line is put into the carriageway to highlight to oncoming drivers with appropriate advanced warning signs that pedestrians may well be present in that section of the carriageway.
An imaginary footpath then?
Councillor Tomlin, followed by Councillor Potter and then Councillor Eyre.
Sure. Okay, thank you. A couple of very brief questions. Just for clarification, please. I think I read in the report and one of the notes had said that we would expect the development to incorporate and promote the use of renewable energy. Can you help me find anywhere where the applicant is proposing to address this, please?
Within the documentation that was submitted by the applicant, it does say that the affordable housing would be constructed to code level 3 for Code for Sustainable Homes. In addition to that, officers are recommending a condition which is number 10, again, which would ensure that all homes are built to code level 3 as well. So that's where we've secured details of that under that condition to make sure that they achieve that relevant status.
Sorry, that doesn't really answer my question. That's sort of insulation and effectiveness of the house. It's not renewable energy. That was a thing that we said was part of the reason for allowing development, that would happen. So obviously that's what's there. It'll come up in debate, but that's not really answered me. The next thing is a minor detail thing, and I know it's probably for reserved matters, but on the colour plan it does refer to the houses being two-storey type of approach, and then it's feature housing. Could you give me an idea what you understand feature housing to mean, please?
Usually a feature house would be one that's of a different design, maybe more of a focal building within that development because it's on a more prominent location, so it's just to add a bit of character, to add a focal point at the end of a road, and that can all be done through design. It doesn't have to be done through kind of the number of stories that a house has. It's just to make that building of a bit more interest.
Councillor Potter.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a couple of questions to the officers, if I may. I wonder if I can just clarify for certain the differences that seem to be around the density. Now, I realise we're talking about a figure of up to 120 units, and but assuming that that does materialise, Councillor Tilbury makes the point, and I think I agree with his calculations, that 120 houses on 3.18 hectares actually equates to 38 dwellings per hectare, not the 34 which is quoted. Would you agree with him, by definition me, that that is the correct density that calculates out in that way?
Yeah, officers would agree with that. We have got density parameter plans with the application as well, which show how that the density would vary across the site, and they're up on the board now, if members can see those.
I've just got another question, really, if I may, about under the heading of biodiversity, and I come back to the skylarks issue, of which I know very little, I have to say. I don't pretend to be an expert, but in regard to another site that was dear to my heart, Kiln Farm, where we made strenuous efforts to actually protect the great crested newt and actually guide that creature into areas of its own, which quite frankly haven't worked. I can say that publicly. But in regard to the skylarks, I mean, what we actually say is that additional information has therefore been submitted showing that a fenced-off area specifically for skylarks could be provided along the northern limit of the green space. The specific size and design of this area could be secured through various clauses in the 106 agreement. But, I mean, I'm trying not to be facetious, but with respect, I mean, apart from signs which say, skylarks, please land here, I mean, how actually do we secure an area, a fenced-off area, that is secure for skylarks and no other creature? I mean, either these things are realistic under the heading of biodiversity and protection of really rare species like the skylark, or putting it on the line, they're not worth the paper they're written on. I don't see how that can be done. I mean, can an expert help me with that?
You could have to confess not being a biodiversity expert either. I mean, we've obviously consulted a biodiversity officer who's looked at this, along with Natural England, and they've both come back to the same conclusion, that there's no objection raised. The issue of how it's done, my assumption would be that there'd be some form of habitat enhancement that would encourage a particular species into a particular area. Now, I think the point around the information that's been submitted so far is that it's given one possible solution. It's not necessarily the final solution, and it's given both the biodiversity officer and Natural England the comfort to say, well, okay, a level of information has been provided on the type of species, and this accounts for all the biodiversity issues raised so far. We're satisfied that through the conditions, I think it's condition referred to in the update paper, which talks about biodiversity mitigation and enhancement, that there are ways in which the biodiversity impacts can be addressed, in addition to the reference that was made to the buffer areas that are also secured by conditions. So I understand the reason for raising it in that way, but I think the issue is that our the professional officers who have looked at it in terms of the biodiversity officer and Natural England and statutory consultee both consider that it is acceptable subject to those controls.
I mean, if I could, it isn't, sorry, you would say, Chairman, a question really, but my only observation really, I mean, my words again, we theorise about these things, and in a perfect world, we've got this sort of quiet environment, we're able to create these places for these protected species, and there's nothing else happening. We actually can, have the right sort of planting, and it's all consolidated, and then these creatures are moved into it. I mean, that doesn't happen in this real world of development, and the housing development going on apace at the same time, construction traffic, and it just doesn't work that way. It isn't going to work at Kiln Farm, as I often repeat. But I'll leave it for now, Chairman. Thank you.
All right. Councillor Eyre.
Thank you, Chairman. My question relates to the paragraph on education on page 31 of 67. We've heard a lot about education through the questions of the visiting speakers tonight. My question to the officer is, in your discussions with Hampshire Education Department. They say there is a plan to undertake an expansion of Whitchurch Primary School to reflect expected levels of housing across Overton and Whitchurch. Is there any more detail on that, please, as to when, how much money that would cost? Or are we, I recognise we're a different authority and we have to perhaps just trust Hampshire that they will do it correctly, but I would be uncomfortable in agreeing to something which will generate yet more children still, over and above what is already expected, without a little bit more detail as to what this plan actually means. I wonder if they've talked to you any more about that, please.
Again, the answer is no. They haven't given us any more detail at this stage in terms of what specifically, the actual specific scheme. But again, it's quite normal in this type of situation that we do rely on the Hampshire as the education authority to say whether they consider that the contributions could be spent in a way that would effectively consume the impact of the development. They have said that through the calculations they've done on the education contributions, that they can mitigate, if you like, the impact of the development. So while I understand there would be a desire to see the information up front, it will depend on obviously when the development actually comes online, when the money is actually going to be spent. That will all feed into what that final scheme actually looks like. So I'm not sure it's information that we would have at this stage in any case.
Councillor Tucker.
The SSSI, can you tell me where the actual line is? Because doesn't seem to be on any of our plans.
The triple SI is the area that's outlined in blue. Yep. Yes.
Councillor Ryan.
Thank you, Chair. I had a question on density, and I'm confused now. Are we saying 34 dwellings per hectare? Has that gone up now?
Yeah, no, it has gone up, so we would recognise that it is 38 dwellings per hectare overall.
That makes my initial concerns even worse then, in as much that the urban design officer sort of was just urging on sort of caution, I think, when if you look at what he was saying in terms of, and I understand this is outlined, but I think it's important in terms of the number of dwellings that we might see. But the urban design officer sort of made two comments, and I think he finished up by saying there's a reasonable prospect. It's not, a good prospect, but it was a reasonable prospect. And here we are now. So do we need to go back to him for some advice?
I don't think we do need to go back to him on advice. I think whatever the overall density, if you like, is, whatever that sort of final calculation is, the key issue here is the parameters that are just set out on the plan in front of us there. And it's the densities per area, if you like, and how that will potentially come forward in the reserve matters, which I think is the key part. Now, the way that the parameters plan has been set out, it's the higher density element in that dark blue area in the middle, so effectively the contained element of the development, moving towards where you've got the sort of top right, if you like, area, which is the lower density, on the basis that that's the area that's then bordered by two parts of the countryside. So it's that, if you like, that transition between the higher density in the middle, which I guess you reasonably expect, towards the lower densities to the edge. So I say whatever the overall density is, and there are different ways to calculate, I must admit, so it depends on how much you count into the area or not. So I imagine there's a debate around that. I think it's to do with the way that density is used in the eventual reserve matters, and there will be lots of different ways that the designs of the properties, the layouts, etc., that come forward in those eventual applications could address the character issues. So I don't think there's any concern, if you like, that an appropriate form of development could come forward through the reserve matters.
Thanks for that, but if I could just question the urban officer's question in terms of, when he uses the word then reasonable, is he saying he's comfortable?
Yes, so the application is for up to 120. I think effectively what the urban design officer is saying, given the information with the application, including that parameters plan, there is a perfectly reasonable prospect that 120 units through the reserve matters can be accommodated on the site.
Any more questions to officers? Good. Thank you. Debate, members? Anyone wish to speak? Councillor.
Let's start something. Thank you, Chair. I think it is a difficult one, and I feel for the people when they are objecting. But I think when we look at the report, and we look at the questions that have been asked this evening, there is nowhere for us to go but to approve the application. I think it would be foolish of us to refuse it. It will go to appeal. And I've looked at it, I've read it, and I cannot find any substantial reasons why we could come up with planning reasons why this should be refused, or sound planning reasons why this should be refused.
Councillor Hood.
Thank you, Chair. I've got reservations about this application, and there's a lot of issues that hasn't been clarified yet. I raised the issue about sewage, problem with drainage, and it's spoken all the way through the report about the concerns that got there. I've spoken about biodiversity. I know that in previous applications which we've approved for Overton, we've identified once it started the development about sewage problems and drainage. I wonder whether it's right we should inflict more harm on Overton until such time as all the other problems have been resolved. I don't know. It's a difficult one, quite likely, as Councillor Rowan said. I struggle at times to find real planning reasons why we should refuse it. I just got this gut feeling I've got that perhaps, we're perhaps a bit premature. Would be so much easier had the local plan been in place, but of course it's not. So I've got reservations about this.
Councillor Bard.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I tend to agree with Councillor Round and Councillor Hood and what's been said. I do have an awful lot of problem though with this education thing. It would seem that Whitchurch Secondary School is oversubscribed. Whitchurch Primary School is probably oversubscribed. Overton is full. There's a bulge in terms of children coming through at the moment in primary schools. And then we're going to add an extra full class to Overton possibly with 36 more children. 26 more children into the secondary education sector. I don't see how it's going to be accommodated. And having seen the way that Hampshire can mess these things up in the past, in my own ward, in that we had a school that was redeveloped and has completely redeveloped for the wrong number, and now they're having to immediately enlarge the place. I don't have a great deal of faith in Hampshire's ability in this direction to get the school numbers right. But on the other hand, in terms of the application, I'm quite sure that the developer will appeal, and because we haven't got a plan in place, and whose fault's that, then it's likely to be approved. So I'm in a bit of a dilemma here, I'm afraid.
Thank you. Councillor Tomlin.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I share the concerns. I have concerns with this site. I've tried to look at it through how I understand policies. We're not to look at we'll pay very little weight to our emerging local plan, so let's park that. Let's look at it with MPPF. I see, firstly, the site is outside of a settlement policy boundary. I mean, that's the first thing. So that's one issue. It doesn't convince me that the application doesn't convince me that it addresses MPPF section 4, which was our old policy A2, promoting sustainable transport and reducing reliance on the private car. We see reference to the site being at the edge of a village located at the recommended maximum 30-minute walk to school, which we talked about. So it's highly likely the school run will be by car, given custom and practice in the borough. There are some 75 extra car movements during the peak hours, or 3 cars a minute, as we had explained to us. Overton, it's narrow, a busy village centre. It must represent significant extra traffic, given the existing community turning out onto the main road will surely promote sort of queuing. I note, I was on page 22 of 67, that we are being asked to consider that the framework travel plan is sufficient to allow the development at this stage, and then we would have to wait until the occupancy of the 70th dwelling before we see the full travel plan. I would want that in front of me now to help me make a key decision, really. To me, that's lacking. MPPF section 11 and 12 refers to conservation enhancement of the natural historic environment. Well, I think we've just had fair chapter and verse on original initial comments from the landscape officer and the urban design officer. I can't see how this indicative layout we've got fits in with 38 now we're saying average density, with Overton with a typical density of 22 to 27. So I can't see how that enhances it. It's my subjective view, of course. And then, of course, we've read the biodiversity, the water voles, otters. So that, to me, doesn't fit with that. Infrastructure, very quickly moving through the traffic and the highways. It draws parallels, to my mind, the access of this proposed site through an existing site is very akin to Kiln Farm, which we obviously debated at earlier DC. I can't believe the comments from Hampshire County Council regarding parking. Some of the on-street parking can assist the creation of a street scene character. I mean, excuse me, but resulting in slower traffic speed, obviously. We've learnt education, the primary school will be pressurised, and sadly we've seen what the pressure can do to some of our local schools in the borough. The secondary school is full. It's going to provoke even more travel for students, so I can't see how that is sustainable. And we talked about sewage. Yeah, is it a quick fix? Is it a big fix? And I go back to my lack of clarity regarding any renewable energy. And so really my point is we shouldn't be promoting development without these points properly addressed. I just think it helps, to understand it is premature. It's clearly brought forward from what we thought it might be in the local plan. Councillor Baker explained that to us. However, I do like the neighbourhood park concept, and that's a nice idea. I agree that this is probably the best, maybe only site in Overton suitable to cater for the village needs, but I feel at a significantly lower density and to respect Overton's character and provide the housing that only its residents need. So I really can't support the application in its current form, and that's the thing, in the current form as presented to me. So that's my contribution. Thank you.
Councillor Tucker.
Thank you. Gosh, it does stretch the grey matter rather a lot, doesn't it, this application? Like so many people, I too am really, really worried about this, because I live not that far from Overton, and indeed go to the doctor's surgery and tried parking in the lane and in the street, and you can't find anywhere to just so that you want to pick up your medication from you have to be pretty fit, believe me, to be able to just go up and park and come all the way back down to the chemist again. There are problems now, but I do realise it's one of these kind of catch, whatever it is, 22 situations. Is it at all possible, I've never raised this before, to grant an outline but say that it cannot be developed until certain of the things that really worry us, like the sewerage and things like that, are totally actually done and in place before. I'm trying to think of all the different things that we're really worried about. Is it possible to do that kind of thing? I don't feel it's strong enough.
Chair, there is a on drainage in particular. There is a condition number 18, which is effectively a gramping condition covering both foul and surface water drainage. So no development shall commence until such time as those details have been agreed. in consultation with the sewerage undertaker. There's then a second part to that, which is that no discharge of foul or surface water from the site shall be accepted into the public system until any drainage works referred to in the strategy have been completed in full. So in that sense, we do believe, well, effectively it will depend on what the strategy, the final detail of the strategy agrees, but that's in our control through the condition, and will be then part of the consultation with the sewerage undertaker in any case. So unless the sewerage undertaker is satisfied that the timing of the works in the strategy are acceptable, then it can't go ahead. The key issue here, I think, is that conditions have to be reasonable and necessary. And whilst there might be some concerns about, you know, what may or may not have happened in the past, the sewerage undertaker, in this instance, Southern Water, have confirmed that on the basis of the information they've had in the application, they're entirely comfortable that a condition can overcome the issues for the final design solution. So I don't think there is anything we can do with this condition to make it more robust, if you like, and I think it is entirely reasonable and an acceptable condition.
So, you're telling me that the problems that we had before at Foxtown cannot possibly happen if we grant this?
What I'm saying is that the sewerage undertaker will not effectively give us the response for us to discharge the condition until such time as they're satisfied by the drainage strategy. So it's with their input, and we won't be able to discharge the condition until such time as they have, you know, agreed whatever is in that final strategy. And I think this really comes back to the issue of, it is an outline planning application. You know, we wouldn't necessarily expect, in fairness, even in a full planning application, we wouldn't necessarily expect to see the final drainage strategy as part of a planning application. It would normally be part of a subsequent condition. Certainly in an outline stage, where effectively we are considering the principle and the access, this type of condition is entirely reasonable. As I say, I don't think we can actually go any further with it.
Councillor Eyre.
Thank you, Chair. I recognise you've asked us not to repeat what other people have said, and I'll try not to repeat, but I just want to refer back to the education issue. I recently attended the Community Wellbeing Ofscom, at which a senior education officer for Hampshire County Council indicated that Basingstoke and Deane, one of the issues was the fact that we have unusually large primary schools to deal with already. I just refer the rest of the committee to that. I would also say that 36 additional children in a primary school, in my opinion, is certainly more than one class. I don't know any teacher that would want to teach 36 Year R children. That would be two classes. There's an anticipated increase in primary age children anyway, we know that, and that is a huge increase. And nationally, we're not sure that authorities like Hampshire are ready for it. Hampshire County Council does not have a good track record in terms of strategic planning for school places, and indeed if you talk to any head teacher in Basingstoke and Deane, you will find that they frequently complain that Hampshire County Council Education Department forgets that Basingstoke and Deane actually exists. They think Hampshire stops north of Winchester. And my final point about this is that I wouldn't want to see infant school children, Year R children, having to attend a school outside the village in which they live, and I can't see anything in this that will tell me that that will not be the case. Thank you.
Councillor Potter.
Well, again, Chairman, trying not to repeat things, but I mean, the few notes I had, I think, were much better expressed than I could have done by Councillor Tomlin in terms of his critique, and I think there are a number of very concerning matters in this application, you know, under the heading of biodiversity, the impact on community facilities, the density which we allude to. We know it's not finalised, but certainly is likely to go in the direction that we've had calculated. The impact upon traffic flows, both in the site and in the village itself. Parking, there's a whole range of issues, I think, that make this pretty ill-considered proposal in many ways. But always we come up against this thing that's going to bind as a development control committee in the future, really, which I find really objectionable. As elected members, I think we're really going to have to grapple with this in some other place. But, you know, we don't have a local plan. We're constantly reminded of that, and the inspector's comments at Kiln Farm are quoted to us in this report about, you know, waiting until the later part of the local plan would be an antithesis in respect of making up the housing provision, and therefore, and we're always told constantly, you know, if we don't approve this, then it's going to go to appeal, we're going to lose the appeal, and we're going to be faced with costs. QED, it follows we've got to approve it. But if that's the way we're going to proceed as a development control committee, I don't quite know what we're going to be doing in the future really, except nodding things through, and that cannot be the way that we want to proceed. I believe there are a number of valid reasons, and I know the officers don't want me to say this, why this can be objected to at this stage. Whether they'll be good enough to sustain an argument with the inspector is another thing because of the hole we're in over the local plan. But if we've got any integrity as a development control committee, we've got to, on occasion, I think, ignore that and make a decision based on what we have before us in the proposal.
Councillor Round.
Thank you, Chair. I think we're all skirting around. Nobody's coming in with any real policy that we can really refuse this. And I understand where we are, and I understand all the issues. Councillor Tomlin refers to the fact that it's not sustainable. We have to develop some greenfield sites within the borough, and when better than developing a greenfield site where it's adjacent to an SPV. So we're going to have to move forward over time. We have to meet government guidelines in terms of how many houses we have to build, it is reluctant, but I think unless we stay here all night going round and around, I would propose approval.
I have a proposal. Do I have a seconder? Thank you. We're just taking it. This is a planning in principle, isn't it? Outline planning permission only.
Yep.
So, those four, raise your hands, please. Those against? The vote, therefore, is lost.
Chair, obviously, as always, respect the views of the committee, but I think on this particular occasion, we really do need to set out the potential consequences of refusing this application, even more so than what's been set out in the report. I understand the concern about the position the council is in. We don't have a 5-year land supply, and that does put the council at risk of applications on greenfield sites. I think both nationally and in the Kiln Farm decision locally, we've had very clear direction as to what will happen at appeal, and that has to be part of the consideration of the committee. As difficult as that may be, the actual outcome of what may happen at appeal is absolutely a material consideration. I think because of where we are in terms of housing delivery, we're already behind, if you like, in terms of trying to meet the annual 748 requirement, still to be tested at the examination in public. On that basis, we're effectively playing catch-up, and the longer that we have no 5-year supply, the prolonged period there will be for further applications to come forward, which won't just be for sites such as this, which are potentially going to be in emerging local plan. It will also be for sites which are perhaps less desirable, both to the council and to local residents. I think the potential consequences of refusal here would be, although I understand the issues around infrastructure and perhaps the schools don't provide the absolute ideal solution, and equally there are concerns around sewerage, etc. None of these, in my view, meet the test of being significant and demonstrably harmful when considered against the benefits of the scheme, which includes the housing supply. And the housing supply, as we know from the Kiln Farm appeal decision, has been very clearly set out as being a serious and significant situation. So that has to weigh very heavily in the decision making. To continue to refuse planning applications such as this, I think will, as I say, certainly puts at risk of the costs award at appeal, and that's on the basis that inspectors now award costs potentially without application by the appellant. So that, again, I think does have to come into the committee's consideration. I think also what needs to be borne in mind is that so far we've been working on the basis of there being a 5% buffer in terms of the housing supply position. That's on the basis of the council's previous good delivery rate of housing. If the sort of trend, if you like, is that there's a continuation of refusal of planning permissions whilst the local plan sort of catches up, then the longer that goes on, the delivery will go down, and then will be a potential 20% additional buffer, which puts the council in an even more difficult position, prolongs that period of time where housing supply is below 5 years, and will put further sites at risk. So I do think all of those issues really need to be really borne in mind, and like I say, whilst I understand the frustration of where it is in terms of all of those matters, I do strongly recommend that the only real sustainable option here is to approve the application.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Based on that advice from the officer, I would like to propose that we reopen the debate, whether I put that as a motion or what, but basically I'd like us to rethink and reopen that debate based on what the advice has been given to us by the officer.
And we just want to check that that is legally doable. Councillor Barnes.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. What kind of time scale are we talking? Are we talking about right now, or our heads are still clouded, and our heads are still full of our heads are still full of our original ideas. Could we go away and think about it, or could we put this to the next meeting or something? No, no good.
I was going to suggest that perhaps if we took a 10-minute break, I will look into the situation and determine the best way forward, if that would be amenable to officers, to members. Sorry.
Councillor Potter.
I mean, with respect to both Councillor Ryan and our legal officer, I mean, my understanding in terms of committee procedure and protocol, I mean, we have taken a vote, a properly proposed vote in the first place, which did not succeed. The normal proposal then that you'd seek, Chairman, obviously, is for reasons for refusal, and we'd have an alternative motion, and presumably the vote goes the same way. That's what we'd end up with. I mean, the planning officer's advice, I mean, is very clear, and I mean, in many ways, a sort of summary of that is, do you lot really know what you're doing and understand the consequences of this? And with respect, looking around the table, I think we probably do. And as I said originally, we are faced with this massive dilemma from here on in. They won't all be the same. Like, I don't think these applications, this one, I would argue, is opportunist by De La Rue and premature. It didn't need to come to this at this stage, particularly when local councillors like Councillor Baker have worked so hard, I think, to be able to get the site still in, but in the second phase of the local plan. If developers choose to ignore those types of initiatives and compromises, well, so be it. It comes before us in its own right. I believe, and I think Councillor Tomlin would support me on this in the way that he expressed it, there are reasons for refusal. I've said already we may not stand the test of the planning inspector. Well, that's the consequence of our decision. We are responsible councillors, we understand that, and I don't intend to change my position.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. I mean, I have put forward a proposal or motion. The legal officer is going to go off and research whether that can be done, and I think we owe it to go that route. And I would ask that that route is what we do.
Councillor Tomlin.
Sorry, thank you, Chair. I've got some questions then. These 120 houses, if approved, is it 3% of our housing supply, or is it some even tiny percent? I mean, is it going to change the situation?
Chair, whilst the legal officer is just looking into the sort of constitutional matter, if you like, yes, it's 3%. It's 3% of the 5-year supply, so it won't bring us back up to over 5 years. But I suppose that's the whole point. We do need a series of approvals to get to that position. And until such time as that 5-year supply is back in place, as I say, there will be at risk of other sites coming forward.
So the only situation I see here, though, is again we've looked at it, we've debated it, we've seen problems, and I think, I mean, certainly my take on it was, as I said at the end, like we treat a domestic application, we sort of are encouraging the developer to come back with something that meets our approval, but what they've heard from the way this committee has seen it, and it's not so, you know, I don't think we can only object or approve. We're not allowed to say, well, we'll approve it with a little bit of this. You know, conditions are you know, there for very valid reasons, but you know, we are elected members to represent the community's wishes, okay, and if it means the borough has got to take a hit in a legal case, that's what the borough's here for, surely. You know, this is going to come up in week after week after week, and we know that, so we've got to be strong, or we might as well not even have this committee. Thank you. Sorry.
I'm going to propose that we adjourn for 5 minutes, because I think we can add conditions and things. There may be another side to this that we're not looking at. And okay, so meet again in 5 minutes. Thank you, members.
It's my jacket.
Mike Townsend is going to speak to us.
Thank you, Chair. Just consult with our legal officer as well. This situation has actually arisen before. Members on the committee at the time may remember the Trumpet Junction site at Park Pruitt, where the vote was taken on a motion for approval and was lost. Subsequently, there was then a decision to have a vote on refusal, and in that situation that was lost. So then it came back to, if you like, a neutral situation where then a new motion was put forward. So in terms of the procedural requirements, I do think that because the motion to approve has been lost, the correct thing to do now is to take a vote on refusal. The only thing I would say is that members aren't tied, if you like, to their original vote. If members, having heard the further advice from officers, feel that refusal is not warranted, then effectively they could, as I say, vote against the motion for refusal. But I think it is right now to take a vote on that basis, Chair.
Thank you, Mike, for that. We will now vote for refusal. Those in favour, raise your hand. Refusing the application.
If the last motion was lost, this is a new motion.
Yeah.
Sorry, Chair, just to clarify, so the vote now, because the vote on approval was lost, the vote now is for refusing this planning application. So so if you want to refuse the planning application, now's the time to vote. Just to be absolutely clear.
Okay, sorry, raise your hands again. Let's vote for refuse the planning application. If you want to refuse the planning application.
Oh, refuse the planning.
You know, hands down, hands down.
It's not clear.
Those against? Against refusal.
Like the other way around, we're against it being refused. We're against it being refused.
Right, the vote.
Members, I understand there is some confusion, but you're having to turn it around the other way. We are voting to support the refusal of the application. Now, we're supporting the refusal. Some of us didn't support that in the first case. So do you want to remain where you are, or do you want to make a change? If you want to remain where you are,
For clarity, we're just going to recount the vote again, if you don't mind. I'm sorry about this, members. So, we are now for refusal. And those, thank you, and those against?
clear as mud.
Yes, yeah.
So, Chair, on that basis, the application would be refused, but now we would need the reasons, and I would just, having got to this point, I would just clarify that in terms of being at the appeal, clearly it needs to be the reasons which we can defend, and as we saw with the Kiln Farm development, the approach of putting lots of reasons for refusal forward which we couldn't defend, could potentially put us at a greater risk of cost. So I just ask members to bear that in mind.
Councillor Tomlin.
Well, okay. We can go through the, not glibly, but reasons for approval. Some of them I've put down. It's the opposite of on page 2 of 67. The proposed development would have an impact on the landscape character and scenic quality of the area, but would successfully mitigate that. I would just say it has an impact on the landscape, or significant impact on the landscape character. This is the application as we currently have it. We have got some concerns about parking on the site and the narrowness, and so the proposed development would currently not provide safe access. And certainly number 4, the proposal would not conserve the biodiversity value. And at 76, the proposed development would not preserve the character and setting of Overton Conservation Area. We can put that in MPPF terms, where we got to achieve sustainable development. Section 4, promoting sustainable transport, don't believe it would currently. Section 11 and Section 12, conserving and enhancing natural environment, conserving and enhancing the historical environment. So there were 3 significant areas there. So that's my take on it. Other councillors, perhaps.
Need to think harder.
Members, we need some significant reasons for refusing this, and I'm afraid I don't think any of those of Councillor Tomlin's would apply. Councillor Tucker.
Can I just say, what I'm concerned about is that if you're starting to put a lot of things that you don't approve of, we have it in our plan going forward as a site that we happen to believe can be approved. If you start saying things that are contrary to that in here, I mean, it would be just laughed out of court. I mean, you've really got to have some very, very significant reasons for refusal if you want to go ahead with what you're suggesting. I'm really, really concerned about this, Mr. Chairman. I really am.
I share your worries. Councillor Tomlin.
I mean, likewise, I agree it's an awkward situation, but we're looking at the application in front of us. And, we are not allowed to say, yeah, okay, in principle we're happy with it, but there's 1 or 2 things we're not happy about. We have to say we're not happy about it. I mean, the situation would appear that we're being told is that the applicant will come forward with this exact application and take it to appeal. There's no, obviously, there's no, it's black and white. Unfortunately, there's no area where we could work with the applicant. So, we've got to take this. We've agreed that there are the issues. I don't know where the policy with schools and the transport, the whole infrastructure side of it. There's, that's where I put it under this sustainable thing, which is a horrible word. I need help on how we can address that. But clearly there's 7 of us here that see issues with items on here. We could all roll over and have our tummy tickled and just let it go. But there's enough here that I voted for myself, and that's what I think is wrong, or needs a better proposal by the applicant. Now,
Councillor Tomlin, I think you may be in advance of half the things you've raised would not be normally raised at this time of the application. Anyway, Councillor Ryan.
I worry this because this is just going to cost the taxpayers and the residents of this borough money. We can't just say we're not happy with it. We've got a gut feeling we're not happy with it. We have to turn that into proper planning policy as to why we're going to refuse it. And we're failing to do that. We just can't do it.
Councillor Potter.
I mean, Councillor Rand needs to be careful, I think, in terms of some of the things he says about the implications in terms of costs and the like. I mean, we always say this DC isn't a political committee, but there isn't a more political committee in the council, in my view. And we are where we are with the local plan for reasons, quite frankly, that we can reflect on tonight if we want to. And the simple fact is that if we are going to be as a development committee told repeatedly from here on in, you might quite frankly have said this 2.5 hours ago, don't debate this application. If you refuse it, it's going to go to appeal, you'll lose the appeal, end of story really. That could have been the limit of our debate tonight. And I have to say, and I warn the committee and I warn the council, that the developers are lining up for similar applications. These are going to fall like dominoes. Either we're going to say an application like this isn't good enough at the present time, it is premature and it's opportunist, and it therefore shouldn't feature in this part of the local plan, although that hasn't been agreed. And unless we're going to have the courage to say that, we might as well give up in terms of our consideration of these planning applications as a DC. There are issues around community infrastructure, in addition to the points Councillor Tomlin has made. There are, I think, arguments with the help of the officers that we can put forward. Whether they'll survive the planning inspectors' comments, I don't know at this stage. We're judging it, I think, on clearly the stuff that we had out of one appeal thus far, and we presume that will be carried forward with the encouragement of the Secretary of State. So be it, really. This council has got to have some courage about its own assessment of where sites should be developed and at what timescale. Either that, or we might as well just become third parties to do it.
Councillor Dunlop, did you...
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, but the previous speaker has encompassed everything I needed to say. I agree with him. Thank you.
Right, members. Councillor Hood.
Thank you, Chair. The reason for refusal. I don't treat this lightly, and I think we've always been proud of our independence in this committee, and I would hate to see that disappear. I've got the greatest respect for the officers and the advice they give it. But let's take it a stage further. If we came to the stage at every single application we had to decide on, and we felt we went against the recommendation, and then the officers would be in a position to overrule that, for argument's sake, then there's no need for this committee. I mean, people like Councillor Mrs. Tucker and David and a few more on the table have been in this committee for a long, long time. And it does worry me, because we should vote with best intentions, we should vote on reasonable grounds for refusal. And I felt tonight that things like danger of waterborne pollutants, need upgrading, resizing the sewer work to help that, drainage problems, is all apparent to me. The two ward councillors have also raised that. But I think that's a strong argument to pursue that. If we're going to be threatened every time with possible costs, and I can understand the concern raised by that, but then where do we end up? As David said, just a committee rubber stamps everything. Why don't we do it at the moment, delegate it to officers at the next stage? I think everybody around this table voted for a true reason, whether we're for it or against it. We had our reasons for voting one way or the other, and I think that should be respected around the table, that we are individuals and we should be treated with respect the same way we treat the chair and the officers. Tonight's been a difficult one. I said from the onset I found it very difficult, this one. Perhaps my head was overruling my heart, I don't know, but I thought there were sufficient reasons in this paper tonight that would justify a decision to vote against it, and I think that should be respected.
Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to come back on that, in as much as I do feel that this is a committee, this committee is independent and always remained independent. There was a sort of suggestion of rollover for what the officer's saying, and that's not the case. I've never rolled over to what officers saying, I've always wanted to question and always will question. And in far as my ward is concerned, I have the proud track record that when officers have recommended approval, we've gone against and won the appeals. So far we have not. So there is no suggestion of a rollover. What we have here is a report and facts which I have assessed and looked at, and in my opinion, we will be we are foolish because we've refused it, approved it. Sorry.
In a matter of accuracy, I think the rollover reference probably to developers, really, in terms of the way that that's my understanding, and that's the way that I think we're going to proceed if we're not careful.
So we still need reasons for refusal. Thank you.
Chair, I think while respecting Councillor Hood's comments on that entirely, I think the position will simply be that we get to appeal and the sewage undertaker will have already said that they're satisfied with the application and that it can be overcome by conditions, which is one of the tests that we have to go through. So, whilst understanding and respecting those views, I don't think it's something that we could take forward as a reason for refusal. Councillor Tomlin put forward reasons in relation to landscape impact, and I guess the view being put forward was on the basis that it's something specific to this site and specific to this, the content of this planning application, which if members have decided to refuse the application, I think is the basis upon which any reasons for refusal should be taken forward. So of those listed, something like landscape character, a case of sorts can be made. I think it will be a very weak case, but a case can be made. But I would urge members to think about not putting lots of reasons for refusal in the hope that one of them will stick, to really consider what is it, if you've already identified the content of this application and the way it's put forward, what is it about the content of the application and the specific proposals that are significantly and demonstrably harmful? Not if you like, what is not ideal about the application.
Councillor Tomlin was first, I think.
Just really to agree with Mike on that point, but can we say, well, my suggestion with regard to overdensity? I think if I'd have personally seen this at a lower density, then this is up to, but okay, well, if I'd see up to, I don't know, off the top of my head, 80 houses, perhaps I might well have been more. I just think it is overdevelopment of the site.
Chair, I think on that basis, if I can interpret the points that have been raised, effectively it's an issue of the number overall. I don't think it's a matter of density. I don't think it's down to the number of units per particular area. I think it's down to the number overall. So it's up to 120, which is of cause of concern. I think there's two issues to that. One would be the landscape character issue that you've already identified. The other would be impact, if you like, on the character of the area. It's really for the committee to decide whether it's one or both of those.
Councillor Bowen?
Yes, Chair. I was just wondering whether, my greatest area of concern is the strain on the infrastructure, and I can't see why we can't get some sort of reason for refusal based upon that. Officers here for a bit of help, because it's been refused now, so we need something.
Precisely the point, but it's for the committee who've decided to refuse the application to put forward those reasons. So if the two reasons are landscape impact and overdevelopment of the site tied together, and the impact on infrastructure, specifically what infrastructure, it would be useful to know if there's particular parts of the infrastructure that are causing particular concern.
Particularly schooling, because that was the points that I was trying to make here.
Can we confirm that those are the two reasons that we are refusing this? Councillor Potter.
Could I just seek advice, Chair? I know this is an outline application, and I know the sort of standard wording we have in regard to the future movements towards a Section 106 agreement, standard wording about what we'd seek to secure, and we've heard some indication of some of the money that might be available. But I think what the committee is, some of the committee have said tonight is that they're not confident that that 106 agreement, when it's framed, could actually satisfy the provisions that we want to see. There are many areas in regard to community infrastructure, the education provision, the impact on that, the transport plan, etc., all of which we have doubts can be satisfied in the context of this development and the impact it will have on a village, and I repeat that, a village like Overton. And we therefore, at this stage, say that this planning application should not succeed. Now, I mean, that is, I don't know whether you can predict, if you like, the unsatisfactory aspect of a 106 agreement. Mike will probably say no, because that's the subject of future legal agreements. But we do have those doubts about that 106 agreement satisfying those areas that we've expressed concern about. And I think that in itself can be a reason for refusal, can it not?
I don't think it is, but if that's what the committee wants to put forward. But I mean, it's quite normal at this stage of the application to have outstanding matters on the S106. And every planning application that comes into us has got that. So this is no different from any other.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, we are searching, and I understand it's the committee's wish, and we've got to find some reasons. And I'd just like to test with the officers in terms of some of the things that I know that we feel we have used, but the things that are coming through that are passionate as such from the committee is this the fact that it undermines our local plan, the future of our local plan, and it is premature. Is there a way that we can dig that out and strengthen those?
I don't think there is, Chair, and I think on the basis of it's a refusal, I think the safest way to proceed would be to have reasons for refusal related to the specific application. I think the issues around the principles, if you like, around prematurity have been very clearly set out in the Kiln Farm application. And as I say, while they might not be particularly acceptable outcomes, they are outcomes nonetheless. So I don't think prematurity is in any way specifically related to this site in any way a sustainable reason. So I think from what I understand, the reasons so far from the committee are the landscape impact, particularly with regards to the number of units proposed on the site, and the inadequate infrastructure within close proximity to the site. So I guess it's a sustainability type of reason that the committee feel cannot be adequately addressed by a Section 106 agreement or conditions. That was the 2 points I've picked up so far.
Can I ask one more question, Chair?
Yes.
I mean, in regard to our local plan, such as it is at the moment, if in regard to all of those sites that we think we have allocated at the present time in the later, I know it's subject still to consultation, in the later part of that local plan, if all those landowners stroke developers come forward with similar applications to this one, at a sequence, and what I describe as premature, bringing land applications forward now rather than 5 or 10 years ahead, we won't be able to resist those. That's what we're saying, is it?
Sorry, the answer to that is yes. The position is, as I said before, the 5-year housing supply puts us in a position where our policies are effectively not up to date, so we have to fall back on the MPPF, and it's very clear in the way that it suggests that we should consider applications for development favourably.
Can the committee just confirm to me, therefore, that the 2 reasons that Mike's just elucidated on are what we are refusing this on? Do I have your agreement?
Chair, on that basis, the application would be refused with regards to those 2 reasons. So it would be landscape impact with regards to the overdevelopment of the site because of the number of dwellings proposed, and the adverse impact on infrastructure because of the unsustainable nature of the site, I would suggest a third, which is a standard reason for refusal in relation to the Section 106 at this time not having been signed.
Are you happy with the Section 1, the third addition? Item number 2. Councillor Gerritsen.
Thank you, Chair. I just would like to make the point that, you know, what we've seen happen here now merely demonstrates that we absolutely do need a local plan in place as quickly as possible, and the sort of decision we've had tonight is not going to make that happen any quicker. In fact, it's going to cause it to be postponed even further.
Moving on, item number 2, which is the Logon Road solar panels, isn't it? Yeah. I'll ask the officer to present. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This is an application at number 7 Logan Road in Basingstoke, and it's a retrospective application for the retention of 10 solar panels which have been mounted on a flat roof to the rear of the existing residential property. Members viewed the site last Friday and viewed it from the street scene, and their viewing notes are contained within the update paper. The officer's recommendation on this application is for approval. There's no further update. Thank you.
Thank you. I have one public speaker. Where is it? Miss Nicola Beck. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
You have 4 minutes, and I will remind you when you've got one to go.
Okay, thank you. Initially, I'm objecting to this application on behalf of the resident of 5 Logan Road. I don't actually live there. I'll start by saying that I do not disagree with solar panels or renewable energy in any way, far from it. However, I do believe they need to be in a suitable place. My mother spends a lot of time in her conservatory enjoying the views of the garden. However, since the panels were erected earlier this year, this has reduced her enjoyment considerably, being the first thing she sees whenever she goes outside. They've also reduced her quality of life further inside the house, insofar as she will not draw the curtains of the windows which overlook the solar panels due to the obtrusive nature of the rear of the panels. I believe that if this permission is granted, I believe it will set a precedent for future requests for solar panels on the flat roofs across the borough. Surely there will be no argument to deny permission to somebody seeking permission for such solar panels on flat roof garages neighbouring their homes in the future. Outside in the garden, the panels have sadly become a focus of the garden. From all parts of the garden they are highly visible, and they are hardly environmentally friendly. Electric cables, breeze blocks and metal poles, none of which sit naturally in a green garden environment. Reason for approval number 2 says that the development is appropriate in terms of siting and design and would relate to surrounding development in a sympathetic manner. I totally disagree with this. I'm not sure how that conclusion was reached, but I do not believe that the viewing panel viewed number 5 viewed the panels from number 5. Can I ask a question at all? Did the viewing panel actually view the panels from number 5 or from number 7?
Not from number 5.
No, it's from the front garden. So you didn't actually see the total site of the panels. So can I just ask that you consider requesting the removal of the panels, or at least reducing their angle to a lower degree? Thank you.
Thank you. Just wait a minute. Are there any questions for Ms. Beck? Councillor Ryan?
Thank you. This picture we're looking at, this is what you're seeing from the conservatory, is it?
Thank you, Ms. Beck. Mr. Martin. You will have 4 minutes. He's the applicant.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Alan Martin, and I live in the house that those panels are on. I've always believed that we should be as green as we possibly can, hence my car is a hybrid car. I have all the forms of safety and storage and green living that I can manage in my house. And one of the things that I have always believed is an almost ideal thing, and that's solar energy. Solar energy is there for us to use, and we should make the most of it. I'm sure that the housing stock benefits from having it. So we put it up because of conviction that it should be done. I had the lady next door to us, whose daughter you've just been listening to, was told what those were going to look like before they went up, and her husband, unfortunately he's no longer with us, but I went around and I explained what they would look like and how they would affect them, and I was told by them both that that's fine to go ahead. I had no idea that we had to have planning permission at that time, by the way. I will say I was doing it out of courtesy, and I went around again after our neighbour's death and spoke to his widow, that's Nicola's mother, and explained to her again, just to make sure that she understood what we were going to do. And she said, yes, if Doug said it's okay, then go ahead. I had no idea what it was going to look like in reality, only how they were going to go on and what sort of angle they had to go at. Unfortunately, the house is east-west, so that the side you see here from my house is west facing. The other side is east facing, and obviously you can see that the only place that we could have solar panels is where they are situated now. I certainly offered, and I will maintain that offer, that I will do anything at all to lessen the effect on my neighbour. I've said, please tell me what you'd like me to do to lessen their impact, and I will do it. Unfortunately, she's quite convinced that the only thing to do with them is to actually take them down. So I'd like to have said I've come to a compromise, and whatever I propose to hide them or modify the view of them would be acceptable to her, but it's not. She doesn't want them on there at all, full stop. And when I showed her the pictures of my attempt to
You've got 30 seconds.
Make them more acceptable in view, from her point of view, as she said, no, I don't want anything except those down, and that's what I want. So I have tried. I was very interested to hear how green my local council are. That was very reassuring, and I like to think that like the thing in Overton, it's a question of not in my backyard very often, and this is literally what is the state here.
Will you come to a conclusion now?
A green pursuit doesn't do us all well, does do us all good, but not all of us can appreciate it from the point of view that we have.
Thank
you.
Do I have questions? Councillor Potter, followed by Councillor Barnes.
If I may. Sorry. Hello, Mr. Mullin. I mean, presumably you were poorly advised by your installers in the first place about the planning approval, weren't you? Have you, I mean, hearing what Mrs. Beck said this evening, I mean, have you talked to them about the possibility of, instead of the panels being, I guess that's about 30 degrees as an angle, about them being a much lesser angle than that? It seemed to me if they're down to about 10%, 10 degrees, sorry. And I imagine, I'm no expert on solar panels, but they'd still attract the sun in the same way. They certainly wouldn't be as obtrusive, obviously, to the people living next door to you. Have you consulted with your installers about that, assuming, of course, we're prepared to give retrospective approval tonight anyway?
Yes, I have asked them about it, and this angle apparently is the one that gives the longest and best pickup from a direct south view.
Councillor Barnes.
Good evening. My view on this is, if you were to paint the side white ports with green and box in the areas that are open with green panels, then surely that would blend in a lot better, wouldn't it?
Yes, it would. It would be the sort of thing that I would have liked to have done, but unfortunately, I have to say that I can't get the lady that's objecting to them to do anything other than take them down. Not changing the angle, not disguising them, just remove them. That's the only thing she wants me to do.
One other thing, did anyone ever object to your very, very substantial aerial sticking up there? I mean, that seems more of a problem than the 8 panels, I would have thought.
No. Yes.
Councillor Round, followed by Councillor Bound.
Can I tell you, the aerial's the same as all my neighbours' aerials as well. It just happens to be, it's identical in number 5.
Thank you. During your presentation, you said that you'd describe to the neighbour what you were doing and show them what they would look like. But you had to admit actually to us also that they had probably, you had no idea what they would look like. So can you accept that perhaps they have got a bigger impact on the sort of neighbouring area and street scene than even what you thought they would have had?
Sorry, yes indeed. They do have a bigger impact than I anticipated or thought. I had no idea they would be quite like that, and I had no idea quite what the angle would be either, so it was a sheer guess. In fact, I think I drew them rather similarly to the way they finally are, but that was sheer luck.
Councillor Bound.
Could I draw you back to the question that Councillor Potter asked? He asked about the angle, and you consulted the installers about the optimum angle, but that didn't quite answer the. Is there not a possibility that the angle could be lessened, and you still to get sufficient benefit?
The problem is, I think the problem is that the angle has to be the correct angle for drainage of water from the surface, so that it remains clean. That when it goes down to a lower angle, the drainage isn't as good, and they cease to work more rapidly.
Any more questions? Thank you, Mr. Martin.
Thank you very much.
Right. Questions to also Councillor League.
It's just a simple one. The house where these are on, the garage where these are on, looking at the picture there, are they both the garages belong to the applicant, or is just the one on the right belongs to the applicant?
I believe it's just the one on the right that belongs to the applicant.
So the one on the left would belong to perhaps the next house along or whatever. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Round.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to ask, I appreciate this is a planning committee, but I'm asking a different question. In terms of building regulations, though, then think in terms of safety, etc., etc., would there have been a need to seek building regulations? This is weight on the building. They are a sale as such. They will be taking much more pressure. And I wonder, from a safety issue, has that been considered? Because to me, there's a big concern there.
I don't know. Building regulations isn't our particular area of expertise, but certainly if it was a concern that members had, then if minded to approve the application, then certainly we could add an informative and alert building control and ensure that they do make sure that building regulations approval was sought, or if not, the retrospective process is followed through an informative.
Any more questions? Councillor Taylor.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I'm not a permanent member of this committee, and I didn't go on the site viewing if there was one. The question to the officer relates to the reasons for approval. And the two questions refer to two different words, one in reason number 2 and one in reason number 3, where it says in 2, the development is appropriate in terms of siting and design and would relate to surrounding development in a sympathetic manner. Now, I don't get that, certainly in terms of what I'm seeing there. And in number 3, the development does not cause any undue overshadowing, overbearing or noise and disturbance impact. I don't get that either, especially when we've just heard from the next door neighbour's daughter in relation to what sounds like it being quite a significant overbearing impact. I don't see that that is sympathetic at all, because I think it stands out against every line and shape around it. So I have some difficulty with this application.
Thank you. It wasn't a question.
Just reasons for refusal.
Questions, or are we? Right.
Of officers. I mean, I think this would relate. I mean, am I right in saying that if you were installing solar panels on a roof, providing they don't actually have a protrusion above the roof line beyond something you don't need planning approval? That was question 1. The other one is just a thought that strikes me really in regard to these panels. Had they been sited by the applicant in his back garden, that ground level, which I guess would still attract the sun, would you need planning approval for that? You know, if they were actually on the lawn area, for example, of the property, but connected in the same way as I presume these are, do you need planning approval for that?
Certainly with regards to on the roof slope, provided they don't protrude above a certain amount, then they don't require permission. With regards to on the ground, to be honest, we'd have to look at that, because it's not something that is generally comes forward. They do tend to be sort of roof mounted things, so I don't know is the honest answer.
Any more questions? Yeah, Councillor Hood.
Thank you, Chair. The advice we've always been given on retrospective applications is we should treat it as if it was a new application. I'm right in thinking that. I think if that came along to me tonight as a fresh application, and I saw it from a number 5 garden, I think it's very much intrusive. I don't think I would approve it.
Right, we're in debate now. Councillor Round.
Thank you, Chair. You know, I accept what the applicant has said about his credentials for sustainability, etc., etc., and I'm sure his electric car is not as ugly as that. I never thought that you could turn around and say that solar panels would be so intrusive in an urban area. You know, I didn't go on the viewing, but I'm looking at this picture here, and I'm assuming this picture is taken from the ground, so it's the street scene. It's what we're seeing. We're looking at that picture, so I never thought that solar panels could have such an impact on an area, and I think Councillor Taylor touched on the reasons for refusal on this application. You know, it is overbearing. It is very overbearing. And I think, you know, that's one of the prime reasons for refusal, and the things like good design, etc., and being in a sympathetic manner, it's just not there. It more than outweighs the benefits of the green credentials, and I would move refusal.
Thank you. Councillor Leake.
I'm the one with the yes. Well, I have to agree with Councillor Round and Councillor Taylor. I think it's absolutely awful looking from the next door garden. It looks like moving into Jodrell Bank, or a small edition of Jodrell Bank. I think it looks absolutely terrible. And I think Councillor Hood's right. If we were starting from the beginning, which I am, because as far as I'm concerned, retrospective, all it does is shows you what it looks like. Whether, you know, and it really does look awful. And I would be seconding Councillor Round's refusal.
I have a proposer and a seconder. Councillor Potter.
I mean, that's clear that you've got that, and I don't know whether you're moving straight to the vote, Chairman. I was only going to say, and I mean, it was obviously seeking to find, in these difficult circumstances, is compromise. It seemed to me, I thought I heard Mrs. Beck say correctly that in her view, and it may not be ours, by the way, that if they were less obtrusive because they were at that much lower angle, then that would be acceptable. And I know what Mr. Martin's been given as advice by the people that install them. Well, it was probably as poor advice as they gave him in the first place when they told him he didn't need planning approval anyway. And it just seems to me that in terms of the way they work, for a small amount of, well, for a small loss of efficiency, you could actually have something there which is at a 10-degree angle, much less obtrusive, still work satisfactorily, and wouldn't involve necessarily the sort of enforcement line we're going down. But it's clearly a view the committee may not share with me, and if it stands on its own as a proposal for refusal, so be it. But there was an area there that Mrs. Beck was talking about, and I think most of us would agree if that was a lot flatter, if that was more nearly on the flat roof line, that wouldn't be as objectionable as it is at the present time.
Councillor Tomlin, followed by Councillor Barnes.
Thank you, Chair. I just wonder, and it's not the case in front of us, if that garage had a small pitched roof, that probably would be an allowed development, and we wouldn't have any question then if someone put solar panels on the other side of it, because you'd be looking at an established custom and practice. You look at tiles. Now, that isn't what we're looking at, but I wonder, as Councillor Potter said about compromise, whether that is a note to the applicant or whether they wish to consider that. Would that be something that we might be happier? In other words, we probably wouldn't be able to stop a pitched roof being built. Thank you.
Councillor Barnes.
Bound or Barnes?
Oh, hi. Yeah, it seems to me then that the main thrust of the objection is, in my view, the supports, not the actual panels. So the panels are doing an actual job. It's just the way it's all put together, isn't it? The supports, I agree with Councillor Potter here. It seems to me it's the supports that are making upset, not the panels. Thank you.
Councillor Barnes, followed by Councillor Round.
Yes, I've a bit of difficulty here. I'm quite in favour of green energy myself, but I can see from the number 5 point of view that they are somewhat obtrusive. But I do have to wonder though, whilst that picture, I don't know what angle that's taken from, but it looks like it's taken from above. I wonder how many times you'd be necessarily looking out your bedroom window at them. You're more likely to be looking from the conservatory. Do we have a picture from the conservatory? Again, I just wonder, yeah, how many times you are actually going to be looking out of the window at that, but I do agree that they are obtrusive. I'm not sure that reducing the angle will really make that much difference, and I think, again, if it was coming forward as an application, I would definitely be voting against it. I'm still thinking on it at the moment on this one.
Thank you, Councillor Round.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's difficult for us to redesign it sitting here. There's clearly could be some ways forward in terms of putting a roof on and what have you, but that's all really ought to come through the planning process. So I think, you know, from my view, I'm refusing it because I don't like what's there. As I say, I support the idea of green, etc., etc., but in this particular case, I don't like there. It's overbearing and it's the impact. So I think it's, you know, we can't redesign it. Councillor Potter has suggested that there could have been a compromise, but I think the applicant has already said that they won't work if they're down lower. So I think, you know, in this case we have to or should refuse it.
Councillor Tucker.
I'd just like to say that most of the people who are really anti it didn't come on viewing, and whilst it is rather large and obtrusive, it when you're there on site, it doesn't look as bad as the photographs portray. I just felt I ought to say that.
Anyone else? Then we'll, before we move to a vote, we'd just like a word from Catherine.
Thank you, Chair. It's just to point out to members that this is a retrospective application, so if there are concerns that lead to a vote to refuse this application, then we'd be seeking members' agreement to take enforcement action, also to secure the removal of the panels. So if that is what members are minded to the route to go, then we would be suggesting a refuse and enforce removal of the panels, reinstatement of the flat roof within perhaps 3 months of the date of serving a notice.
Thank you.
Sorry, just
Councillor
if I may question then,
Yeah.
just in response to that. So, if we refused it and we put the enforcement date for 3 months, is the applicant at liberty to come back and take my suggestion of putting a pitched roof up so that to save unnecessary waste?
Certainly a 3-month compliance period would allow the applicant time to consider their options and either amend their proposals and submit a new planning application for consideration, or to appeal against the notice that was served, against the refusal of this application, if that's the route that happens.
Any more questions on them? Right. Those in favour of approval, raise your hands.
No.
Refusal. All right. Okay. Those in favour of refusal, raise your hands. Those against? Officer will read out the conclusions.
So picking up from the discussion and debate that I heard, that the two main reasons for refusal are, first would be that the development isn't sympathetic to the surrounding area, it's detrimental to the character of the area, and the second reason is the impact on the neighbour at number 5 by virtue of being overbearing on the amenities of that neighbour. So those are the two reasons, unless there's anything further.
Thank you, members. I'd just say to the applicant and the objector, I'm sure you can get together to sort that one out. Item number 3? Item number 3, members, which is the pruning of Copper Beech, which belongs to one of our fellow councillors, Councillor Gardner. And there is a map, but it's in the wrong place, I think. I can't remember where
I
it
thought he
is.
was going to get a telephone mast in his garden. It's only one along.
It's one along. Yeah, I propose to move this from the chair, and thank you very much, Councillor Potter. Do I have your agreement? Thank you. Item number 4.
Good night, David.
Item number 4, which is telecommunication station. It recommends it be approved. Are you going to speak on that? I propose to move this from the chair. Do I have a seconder? Thank you very much, Councillor Hood. We're in agreement? Agreed. Item number 5. Communications again. I've lost my place.
There you go. Page 59. There we go.
Oh, God. Berkeley, do you want to... I want to move this one from the chair too again. Thank you, Councillor Potter. You're my man.
I'm Horace tonight, so I'll second it.
And do I have your general agreement? Thank you. Number 6 is another Chinham Telecommunications, and we are going to have the officer introduce this. But then
This application is for the removal of an existing pole and its replacement with a 17.5 metre pole. It really is just to draw your attention to the update sheet and the fact that we've now received comments back from the landscape officer. They have no objection. The highway officer has made comments, and they've pointed out that the new mast will be closer to one of the proposed vehicular accesses to the proposed Razor Farm development site. However, in response to this, members should note that the proposed mast will still be sited significantly away from the proposed access, and the application recommendation remains as per the report, that no objection be raised.
I propose that we move the... Is there a ward councillor here? No? I propose to move that from the chair. And Councillor Potter, you're going to second it? Thank you very much. Oh, we need to vote on number 6. Do I have your agreement?
Agreed.
Agreed. Well, thank you, members. That was a sprint finish.